today. Um, Neil has a history in the medical health profession, and so he has a specific interest in what is going on here. But he's also been politically active in the realm of bipartisanship. I worked with him a little bit. I participated in a program he did that was called Our Better Angels, I believe, which was about trying to talk across political challenges. And definitely this world we're living in now is a combination of political challenges and medical challenges. And Neil is a thoughtful person who's been trying to pay attention to what various folks are saying. And so, as a result of that, I asked if he might be willing to share what some of the thinking across the political spectrum has been regarding what's coming next in response to the coronavirus. And so he agreed to do so. So thank you, Neil, for coming.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Should I just jump in?
Yeah, why don't you just tell us a little bit about, I mean, obviously, the whole question of quote unquote reopening America or getting things started again economically is even more in the news than when we talked about it last week. And so we've heard a variety of things from a variety of voices, and I'm thinking you might be able to at least help summarize that for us.
Sure. Well, as Reed was saying, I have a background in healthcare, but I'm not here as an expert in infectious disease, epidemiology, public health, or any of those things. I'm a concerned citizen, and I'm doing my best. I feel like I'm sort of personally driven to try to understand what's going on, which I want to say is I find very challenging. And if it's challenging for me, it's going to be challenging for a whole lot of people, because I have a background in researching medical evidence and literature and stuff. So theoretically, this should be easier for me. But and I'm finding that with former colleagues and things like that, that this is just hard. So I'm not presenting today by any means a comprehensive understanding of this. It's what I put together. And I also tried to think about why I feel driven to do this. And part of it is it's just that's important. And that's sort of my nature, is to try to research and synthesize things. But the other is it has a real meaning, because I believe that how we each behave impacts the health and safety of everyone, especially our healthcare providers. And the other thing I believe is that the more I understand, and I feel it helps me have more resilience about handling it, because I can prepare for different scenarios. So I've tended to put together summaries for friends, family, and they seem to like it. So I hope this is helpful to you. And I really am open, because I'm learning as I go. If you have disagreements, you've heard different things, questions, interrupt, let's talk about it. But in regard to reopening, in the reading I've done, one is it's so hard to find a concise, comprehensive view of what reopening it means and what's required for reopening. For example, it's not infrequent, I see, at the national conversation level. It's not infrequently presented as a black or white. Okay, we're reopening at the end of May, or we're reopening in June. And then when I read experts across the spectrum, this isn't black or white at all. So I get concerned in our public discourse about the disparity between these different conversations that we hear about, and how are we going to come together as a nation to be able to handle all this. So there was a summary in 3 different reports which I've read that reflect the political spectrum. One is from the American Enterprise Institute, which is a right-leaning organization, and the primary author is Scott Gottlieb, who was the FDA head for 3 years with Trump, and he was one of the few officials in that administration who's been widely respected by both in right and left-leaning. And also, as part of that report, there were also researchers from the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, which doesn't have a political leaning. So and another report was from the Center for American Progress, which is more progressive. And the third report I read was from the Harvard Center for Ethics, which was very interesting because it had not just scientists on it from epidemiology and public health, but people concerned about liberty and justice and what happens when our government gets involved, those sorts of things. So here's my take across all those three. There's similarities and differences among all of them. And I'm not going to talk about this. I don't have it comprehensively in my mind. I'm still grasping it. But I'll tell you some headlines about what I see as similar and different. The thing that encourages me, I see a convergence of experts that in order to open up more, for us to be, that opening up means a gradual reopening, certain businesses going back to work, relaxing social restrictions, but more vulnerable populations will likely restrict themselves more than others. And what's needed is a clear milestone in terms of the reduction in number of cases. I've seen several things: significant reduction and flattening of the number of new cases, or a significant reduction in flattening in deaths. Another one I've seen is the percent of people who test positive. Right now, I read a report that 40% of people test positive. That's way too many, because this virus is so infectious. The minute you lift restriction, it can explode again. And so one is a reduction by various different measures of the cases in the community. A second is that the healthcare system has to be able to handle any potential surge, because what's happened when other countries have reopened is that they'll get pop-ups, hotspots, and a surge of cases. And the healthcare system has to be able to handle that. They have to have the personal protective equipment to do so. A third requirement is testing. And I see different criteria for who you test, but definitely anybody who has possible symptoms should be able to get a test. And that's one viewpoint. The more extreme viewpoint is by Paul Romer, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, who thinks everybody should get tested every 2 weeks, which would require 22 billion tests a day. So the American Enterprise Institute, Scott Gottlieb, they suggest we need 2 to 3 million tests a week. The Harvard Center for Ethics said millions per day. So again, you see there's these variants in what people think we need, but everybody agrees we need to test anyone. The second thing they agree on, we're going to need lots more than we have. So and then the third criteria is that, so I talked about the number of cases being reduced, healthcare capacity to treat and to have personal protective items, and then the ability to test everyone who has it. Concomitant with the testing, you have to have the ability to, if somebody has a positive test, track all their recent contacts over the last 2 weeks, and then isolate them and even test them. And that's called contact tracing. And for that, you need an army of public health officials and public health personnel to go out and interview people and and track them down. Because the goal is that it's so infectious, if there's a surge, you want to be able to get on top of that when there are hundreds of cases, not thousands. By the time you've got thousands, it's way too late. Also, an interesting perspective on this from the right-leaning Scott Gottlieb, who was part of the Trump administration. He says people aren't going to really go out and feel safe unless they know we can do that kind of jumping on any kind of hotspot. Because if you don't know that, you think there are thousands, it's going to be real difficult to go out. So those are and what they anticipate is that this require ongoing monitoring. Oh, how many public health officials do we need? I can't tell. The one estimate I saw was 300,000 in the United States, but it could be less than that. But in any case, you get the idea that to ramp up testing, public health surveillance, those sorts of things, it's going to require a lot more than we've got right now. The other, let's see, what are we trying to get to is we need therapeutics so that we can limit the serious consequences of the illness, and a vaccine.
So therapeutics means treatments, right?
Treatments, yes. And good news is, I don't understand all these, but they're antiviral treatments. And the good news is all the world scientists in health arena and public health arena are working together on this. And there are some promising antiviral agents. And then we need a vaccine. And originally I saw estimates that take 12 to 18 months. The Scott Gottlieb in an article today suggested it's going to take 2 years. So that's when we really are able to come out. And I've also tried to get a picture of what it's like coming out, how we open up. And it depends on the business. Not many of these reports think we're going to go for a long time in a society where we can have more than 10 people together at any one time. So large gatherings will be limited. So very few of these people think there's a return to normal in the next year to 2 years, depending on how long it takes to get a vaccine or therapeutics. Let's see. Oh, you may have also heard about the idea of the testing we're talking about is diagnostic testing. Do you have evidence of the virus in your body or not? The other type of test is called a serologic test, where it's tests for antibodies. Like if you've been exposed to the virus, have you generated, your immune system generated antibodies to fight the virus? So they're working on those because they think that'd be promising because we could tell who's immune, that they'd be safe to go back to work, those sorts of things. But I've also been astonished about how little we know about this virus and that we don't know. Most of the experts that I've read feel like it will confer some immunity for some time, but people aren't sure about that. They aren't sure how much immunity or how long it'll last. So I've been pretty amazed about how little we seem to know about this right now. We've prepared for I don't understand all the different types of viruses, but this is in a class of viruses that apparently our science and epidemiology and public health hasn't been as prepared for. So I'll stop here, read, and open for discussion, comments. As I said, I'm interested in hearing if you've heard something different, disagreements, other ideas. Oh, one other thing I'll say is that each of these plans, there are varying opinions about how much we could use technology to track people, all the way to the point that we each have an app that tracks where we are all of the time. There are real concerns about the political will to do that and the social intrusion that causes. So I'm not clear on all these plans, but that's another area of variance across them. So I'll stop there.
I have a couple questions, but I also am interested in any of you just either opening your microphone or clicking on the chat box, the little word cloud thing that's up in the upper right hand corner. You can type in a question if you don't feel like that. And if you're on the phone and you try to talk and you can't, it may be because you were inadvertently muted. And the way to unmute yourself is to press *6 on your phone.
Yes, this is Don Tarbutton. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wonder if my brother just sent this to me this morning. I wonder if you've seen the 6 criteria for countries considering relaxing their lockdowns published by the World Health Organization.
I haven't seen those. And
well,
do you have a sense of them?
You covered most of them in your presentation. I appreciate that. It says these are basically the lessons learned from China and South Korea on how to best emerge from lockdowns and what needs to be in place to avoid a second wave of infections.
Anything that they said that Neil didn't touch on that you think we should discuss?
Let me just quickly read them. They're very short. Transmission should be controlled. We've talked about that. Health system capacities are in place. We've talked about that. Outbreak risks are minimized in special settings like health facilities and nursing homes. We didn't really talk about that. Preventive measures are in place in workplaces, schools, and other places. Importation risks are managed, and communities are fully educated, engaged, and empowered. So we've got a ways to go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Sure.
Just today, the Kitsap County Public Health has taken over control of the Kitsap public testing, which is out at the National Guard Armory in Bremerton. And they are now open to specific groups. You need to make an appointment, but you don't need a doctor's referral. If you're older than 60, have an underlying medical condition, are pregnant, or work in a setting where health services are delivered, and you need to have some sort of symptom, which is probably what would cause most of us to go ask for a test to begin with. Public testing. I'm thinking that we're starting to get closer to seeing some movement on that, Neil, both because there are private companies that are getting involved. There are more players who are trying to work on this. We know that that Bill Gates and Wellcome have been working together with some money from MasterCard to try to put together testing. I'm thinking that although this has been really rough without any testing, we're starting to see some movement towards testing.
Yeah, I just read an interview with Scott Gottlieb again. Again, he's the former head of he was Trump's first FDA commissioner and a physician and public health expert. And so what he said is that we likely have the capacity to ramp up to like, I'm not sure, it's 1.5 million. I think it's a week, but I'm not absolutely sure. But he said what we need is, in his opinion, 2 to 3 million per week. And he was asked, what are the constraints? So my understanding from him is that when we hit a ceiling where we're using all the manufacturing and supply chains that exist, when we hit that ceiling, which could be around 1.5 million tests per week, we have to have new manufacturing and supply chains, which is going to take time. Then the other limiting factor, he said, is all that it's not the testing, it's like the reagents, plastic tips, swabs, those sorts of things. And he felt the problem we have there is that many of these components are manufactured outside of the US. So we don't have as much control over it, may have to ramp up. So when he was asked, what's his estimate if we did ramp up all these things, get new supply chains, new manufacturing, and he said we have the ability to get there by September. So that's his estimate. Now, I just want to say I hear other people like, say, end of May, end of June, and I'm starting to think, this is just my perception, and I'm not asserting this as a fact, that it depends on who's giving the estimate. Like there's a certain, if you're doing epidemiologic modeling, those people say May, June, but then they don't talk about all these other things that need to be in place, except in the fine print, in the frequently answered questions. So I'm reassured that they think the same things. But if you look at what Scott Gottlieb says from the perspective of supply availability, then he says September. So it's possible that people are using somewhat different bases. Here's what I'd say is, I'm not confident everybody's using the same criteria to tell us what's a good time point. We would need to ask all of them. Like it could be that the modelers say May or June, and unlike they disagree with Scott Gottlieb, that we should be able to ramp up manufacturing, or they disagree on the number of tests, but I don't know that. And so I'd love to get all these people in the same room.
Or at least on the same Zoom call.
That's right. Maybe on this call.
So Karen King said that she's heard that Japan and China have had surging infections since easing restrictions. Have other people heard this?
Yes. Yes.
Say it
Bonnie,
again.
go ahead, Bonnie. So the idea is that there's been some easing of restrictions in Japan and China, and that they've seen some surging of restrictions or of infections. Lawrence and Bonnie were saying something about it.
I heard that in Wuhan, they'd had a surge after they opened everything up, it just instantaneously. But now there has been a surge. That's what I've heard.
Yep, that's been reported. Yes.
Who is that talking?
Lynn, sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Neil, have you heard anything about that?
You know what? I have heard that, but I don't have the facts or details on the tip of my tongue.
Uh-huh.
And it's also consistent with what I've read about what to expect with this. It's so infectious. You're
Right.
going to have outbreaks, and it's possible that we have to prepare for the likelihood we might open up and then have to shut down again. This Harvard Center for Ethics argued that that's going to hurt us more in the long run. So that's why they recommend 3 months to get it really under control, ramp up testing. Whereas the American Enterprise Institute says 14 days. So I think then your values and certain things that you're emphasizing and scenarios you anticipate come into play here.
Yeah, well, the other question that plays into this, the political or economic question, is how do we sustain our society if we aren't using the methods to feed and clothe and house people that we have traditionally used, which is get paid by your employer, or or use the money that you have saved carefully in the stock market. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, the fine. These are the footnotes. This is the fine print.
That's the FAQs that may be very different from person to person.
Yeah. Oh, incidentally, people have to eat and they have to buy food. And another perspective that I found, it just gives me a deeper sense of what's going on in our society right now. We're not all sheltering in place or locked down. Grocery store workers are out there, and 41 of them, by count I've heard, have died in the last month or two. So we have people out there now putting themselves at risk for us,
Yes.
in addition to the healthcare providers.
Yeah, and mail carriers and
Yeah.
garbage collectors, and I mean there are a lot of people who are still making contact with people on a regular basis, and so they on the one hand are at risk themselves. They also are at risk of transmitting a virus to somebody else, like us, if we happen to have brief contact with them. Those of us who are trying to shelter in place. And of course, you also have people who, in lovely weather like this, want to go out and take a walk in the park. And so the park district on Bainbridge has been trying to persuade people to just get their exercise in their own neighborhood rather than out in the world. And I happen to have a 13-year-old grandson who can't quite grasp the idea that he can't go play touch football with people. School's out. I mean, he knows and he doesn't know. He doesn't, because he's 13.
Right.
I was curious. I haven't decided yet if I need to wear a mask if I'm taking a walk and can keep distance from people.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been, but I'm guessing there's different practices right now.
Yeah. Question from Howard: is there anything we can do to improve the testing capability in our communities or in the state? Any ideas about some of the players in the health community that are involved here? Neil?
Well, from what I understand, I don't know the details of that, but there's lots of research and people developing different tests. There are problems with some of the testing reliability and accessing these tests. So I know there's a lot going on, but I don't know all the details of that. And given what Scott Gottlieb said and what I've read, I just wonder if this is really going to be feasible without a national effort. I'm encouraged that regional governors, like West Coast governors and groups in the East, are coming together. Yet we need a bigger effort, I think. So, so it needs manufacturing, it needs people to administer them, it needs personal protective gear, it needs reagents and swabs to do it. It's like we know what's needed. We just have to ramp up the personnel, all the supplies that are needed.
So I think what you're saying is that both on the East Coast and West Coast, there are some groups of governors who are getting together and could regionalize some of those pursuits, maybe, which would give us some economies of scale. And much earlier, I can't remember, time is so weird right now, but I think it was a week and a half ago that Jim Hayner shared with us a video of a TED Talk with Bill Gates about this issue. And one of the things that he talked about in there was the work that he's been supporting, that the Gates Foundation has been supporting, for much less invasive swab testing that could actually be done at home eventually. And those kinds of things would make a difference. Yes, Lynn?
I was just going to say, my daughter lives in Sammamish, and apparently I heard this on the news, and then she confirmed it, that Microsoft, in connection with Amazon, is trying to come up with an in-home test that would just be available for people in King County. And, I think we are fortunate in that, number one, we're kind of ahead of the rest of the country on all of this in terms of leveling off. But we're also, with the University of Washington, that is one of the largest reported on testing and research facilities in the country, I think, for this right now. So hopefully, once we get some testing in place, it'll come to us fairly early in the process. Hopefully. But I agree with you, Reed, that this does have to be a national effort. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking that at this point, given where we are, having a regional effort is better than trying to have just a local effort. And we may or may not get to a national consensus on this one.
Right.
I mean, that seems pretty evident from the news of the last 24 hours. And that idea that that it might represent dramatic different ways to support the community. How much support can we expect to give to people who are being furloughed? What are we going to do with unemployment benefits? All that kind of thing. But I do think that the testing, Howard, is improving, and there are some promising signs. Also, one of the things that was mentioned in a news conference that the governor gave, he was asked about testing and the idea of these technology, the apps on your phone. And I know that I've read that Apple and Google, in an odd state of affairs, are cooperating on trying to develop some sort of an anonymized way to let you know if your phone has been in the vicinity of somebody else who has since tested positive. And that would at least be sort of that early warning system that Neil was talking about. Sheila, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did, because you mentioned furloughed people, such as myself, because I work for the Mariners, and obviously we're not being seating hosts over there, obviously. And what the Baseball Club of Seattle, or Mariners, have done is they've set aside at this point $1 million to send out in grant form to anybody who wishes to apply for it. And I should be hearing in another day or two whether or not my grant was accepted. They're going by way of need. And I'm very impressed with that. Even if I don't get anything, I'm very impressed that they are caring about their workers.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've been talking. I'm on a Slack, which is another application where people share this kind of information. A Slack conversation with a group, Bainbridge Prepares, and there are a group of restaurants there who are looking at how they might be able to help with feeding programs. And I know that the barn, a woman at the barn stepped up to do some distribution of food on Fridays. I guess it's 3 days worth of food every Friday.
Let me interject there, okay? I
Yeah.
received the first go round of that. Actually, it's for me, it was more like 6 days because there was enough for 2 meals in each one of them. And the food is fantastic. And please remember, when One Call for All comes around, give money to the barn, because I certainly will. And I was just so impressed with this, with the instructions and the whole 9 yards. I can get into tears about this because it is so lovely to have that food delivered, and the food is excellent and interesting and good. And they're taking orders now for this Friday. And you need to get in touch with, is it you, Lynn?
It's a little challenging. You can order it online at the barn, and then or talk to helpline, and then our IVC people are delivering it. But we need to know, we have to have all that in place by Wednesdays of the week. So yeah, we're trying to figure out how we aren't duplicating efforts here, but we are basically the deliverers. But our IVC folks can call us directly, and the rest of the people can either sign up online or, I think through the barn, or go to the barn website. And
I'm sending out an email about this tomorrow morning to senior center folks with the link and all that. So
good.
If this is of interest to you, but there's also some interest from the Streamliner about maybe helping with the Super Supper activity. So there, this kind of generosity and maybe redistribution, it's definitely charity on the fly. And there's I don't know how long-term sustainable it is, but it might provide some models for other communities as well. We're all it looks like gonna have to think globally and act locally, as they used to say.
Mm.
So what are the ranges you've heard, Neil? It sounds like anywhere from probably not May 1, but maybe as early as mid or late May, to some sort of an easing up to even a month after that.
Or September. And I think that if you look at the criteria, what we can be watching for is there a ramping up of reliable testing? What % of people are testing positive? Is the case rate really death rate really coming down? Have we hired public health care officials, personnel to be able to do contact tracing and isolation of people who've been exposed? So I think that to me, I'm starting to think of less of the data as the emphasis and just sort of letting go of, I feel I need to let go of attachment to a particular date until I see these things happening in a consistent way. And again, I get concerned about family, friends, all these people, is that if I'm interested in your thoughts about this, because it seems to me that preparing for the long term depends on the truth and the realities of what we're facing. That if you get up your hopes too early, then you've got, not only do you have to deal with a setback, but the disappointment in the setback, and it can undermine trust. So I'm curious what you all think. I'm very concerned about the public discourse that goes on about this in the media and around that, and trying to think about how I can help shift that.
Well, I think the point you made about the disappointment, like you're going for a certain date and you're kind of ready, this is going to happen, and it doesn't happen. And then the additional thing of dealing with the disappointment. So stretching the date out farther just seems mentally healthy as well as maybe physically healthy. I mean, it gives people, okay, we have to continue. You're kind of in the same mindset instead of, I think, we're not allowing ourselves, we're self-disciplining in so many ways, but I think it would be so additionally hard if we do have to be disappointed in a date, a time.
Yeah.
Right on, Bonnie.
Yeah.
I will add this. Ann Brown, who can't get on here, but she's getting this as a recording. Anyway, she's at Madison House, and they are quarantined to their room pretty much, except they can go down for dinner, for the meals. They can go outside and walk, get this, in their parking lot.
Ugh.
That's it. That's it. Oh, wait a minute. They can walk all the way down on the driveway to Madison. Oh, no, and back again. She's out. I mean, I'm able to get down by the waterfront. I can go down because I'm on my own. I can do that. I'm careful about with the mask and the whole 9 yards, which I do wear. But, I think of her, and I think of all the people that are over here at in assisted living, and they literally cannot get out of there. Well, I mean, they can, but they can't, kind of thing. And it's so, that's got to be, if anybody would tell me if I was there, and I would hear it might be September, I would start going absolutely apeshit. Pardon my French. I really would, because that just, it seems impossible to live here at that length of time, and stay in the way I'm staying.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing that one of the things that we might look at from what Neil is suggesting is the idea of what we can do to be safe and what's a reasonable level of concern. I get it after the terrible deaths that we've seen in assisted living and nursing homes around the country, that Bainbridge Senior Living would be very hyper about trying to protect, because as this virus is so virulent, I guess that's redundant, that it would be they'd be at great risk if anybody in the facility might be at a dinner table there with COVID. But better testing, better understanding of, it's taken us a while to learn about how effective and what kind of masks we might use. There might be some things that would work, especially if we are vigilant about our own behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And Howard was also commenting again. He was saying, what about using volunteers to be trained to do testing in a coordinated effort at a local level? And I'm guessing that to the point that our testing gets to be simpler and more closely administered by individuals, we have a better chance of that. That people might be able to help who aren't medical professionals, help with gathering information about distribution of COVID.
I would do that in a minute.
Well, you might not be able to, because it probably would be people under 60.
Oh, darn. There it goes again. Thanks, James. I love you too.
Yeah.
The picture of people being quarantined in their rooms, that's unpleasant. At the same time, we all face these choices about the level of risk we face. I'll be 69 this month, and I'm in a higher risk group. And this is not something I want to get. It's pretty, they can't predict, unless you have, of course, if you have additional chronic illnesses, that's a problem. But if you're in a risk category, it's hard like that. It's hard to predict who's going to get worse. So those of us in the older range are going to have some hard choices. It may be that the best thing is to have a longer isolation, which means then if quarantine in the room is the best for handling risk, do the families understand that? How are people helped in managing that? I wonder how, if there are some mitigating things we can do for the mental stress of all and emotional stress of all that.
Mm-hmm.
I do hope that to some
Bring
degree,
it
things
now.
things like this conversation allow us to look at each other and talk at a relatively, at least perceptually close,
Yeah.
in a way that we didn't ever think about 3 months ago. The senior center had no virtual programs, and now we have 5 or 6 different groups meeting,
And thank goodness for that.
Yes.
and it's happening all over. I mean, it's not unique to us, but it's a way to keep our human need for contact when we don't have the physical ability to. It's not wise.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Neil, I really want to thank you for sharing with us, and I, of course, want to invite you to consider joining the senior center because we're great fun. And if anybody, and if anybody has any suggestions for conversation topics, tomorrow Ann Lovejoy is going to join us and talk about gardening in the time of COVID. Gardening is, and I'm hoping that she'll talk a little bit about what you can do in when you have a porch to work with rather than a backyard garden. And then on Thursday, we're going to talk a little bit with Janet Brooks. And on Friday, we're going to hear about Kitsap Fresh, which is a way that farmers are working to try to get food out, even though farmers markets are pretty much not a thing right now. So thank you all. And I think that was a very informative little conversation, Neil. We really appreciate you helping
I
us
really
out.
enjoyed it. Thank all of you for your participation. It's been rich. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Neil.